Greetings, everybody. YouTube Lokai Nama. Here we're going to do our weekly Q&A. Random Q&A. Everybody's welcome to ask whatever questions you got. Now, I might not notice your question, see your question. Don't take it as an insult. I might not feel like answering that particular question. Don't take it as an insult. It's just free-for-all. The questions that attract my attention, for whatever reason, I'll just answer those, okay? And hello, Croatia. And what I'll do is you guys like to hear the instruments, right? Now, I know you kind of really want to hear this one, but I got to tell you the truth about this one. Can you even hear that? It's not that loud, right? Hi, Purusha. So it's kind of a cheap Vina, and it's not that loud, and it takes forever to tune it. If you want to hear it, go to the videos that I did on the 27 Stars, 27 Gods series. It's in the introduction. You really need to put a microphone on that one to be able to hear it. But what I'll do is I'll play you some drum beats from the Mridanga. And see, this is called a Mridanga. This is called a Kol. It's a clay Mridanga. And it's my favorite drum. So what I'll do is when I'll play a beat for like one cycle or something, and that's when you can type in your questions. Then when I'm done playing the beat, I'll take a look at what questions are there. And then pick one or two out, whichever ones catch my eye, okay? So let's see, I'll start off with my favorite drum beat. It's called, what is this one called? I don't even know what it's called. It's Gita Ki E Dagida. That's the bow for it. Gita Ki E Dagida. And the cartel will go here. It's called Ektal. Dagita, din dagi, dagita. Isn't it a sweet sound, this one? When it goes very high. It's my favorite thing in the world. Okay, so let's see what questions you got. Flip over to my chat window. Okay. Aishwarya, somehow this caught my attention. Oh, this caught my attention. Fran gave a very good question too. Okay, these are all really good questions. Let me hold the scrolling here so I don't lose these questions. Fran says you have some words for newbies. So, yeah, newbies, you're the luckiest people, really. Because you have a chance not to get your head filled up with garbage, more or less, or stuff that's just not very clear. If you're a newbie, you're lucky. But you might not be a newbie for long, so you might ruin your luck. But what's lucky about being a newbie is that you have the chance to learn from scratch. And learning from scratch is a really wonderful thing. So this is the most important step when you're going from the step of 0 to step 1, is to get the right source of information. Otherwise, if you get the wrong source of information, you start to lose that edge that the newbie has of not having misconceptions. And so my word of advice for the newbie is you find something that actually makes sense. And you don't just think, God, I love astrology and this makes no sense, but I guess if I learn more about it, it'll make sense. No, probably if it doesn't make any sense, it just doesn't make any sense. So find something from the beginning. It should be making sense the way that somebody is explaining astrology to you. And what you want to do is avoid people who dump you into techniques If you have somebody explaining astrology to you right away, showing you techniques, that's useless. Because how many techniques can you memorize anyway, even if they're good techniques? You need to be able to look at each individual chart as an individual, because each individual person is an individual. Memorizing techniques, memorizing yogas, etc. is not really going to help you. Unless you have a very good teacher who can show you the essence of those techniques and yogas. So for the newbie, give your attention to the planets, understand what the planets symbolize. That's the most important first step to becoming proficient with astrology. Understand it so clearly that everything about it makes sense. Everything about what every planet represents should make sense to you before you proceed. And then learn about the science. And everything about that should make perfect sense before you proceed to learn about the houses. And then learn about the nakshatras. When you got those 4 things down, you'll learn the techniques so quickly. And because everything will make sense. Okay, those are my words for newbies. Thank you for that excellent question. Hello, Ireland. Here's another one. V Bravo, is 51% a good score for a relationship in my compatibility report? You see, in my compatibility report, there's a little thing in the beginning that says read me first or something like that. This is important, where it explains the scores, right? So 50 means normal. So 51 means, hey, it's better than normal. Not that much better than normal, but it's notably better than normal. 55 is a lot better than normal. 60 is, wow, this is a great relationship. 70 is like, holy crap, what's going on here? You guys must be twins from the previous life. Similarly, if you keep the same scale and go below 50, then it starts to get worse and worse. So like 49 is like, it's basically average, but it's a little bit more difficult than normal. 45 is like, hey, this is pretty, kind of probably a red flag, an orange flag. 40 is like, forget it. And 30 is like, you must be crazy to even, why did you even get this compatibility report? Can't you tell? So 51 is pretty good. 51 is acceptable. 50 is acceptable. Anything close to 50 is acceptable in my compatibility reports. Question from Aishwarya says, my question is, in a conjunction of Jupiter and Sun, will Jupiter be combust? Yes. In spite of the fact of the 2 planets being friendly to each other. Yeah, that's what the Sun does. The Sun and Jupiter are friendly, but you don't want to get too close to the Sun. Right? Now, I did a video with Purusha where I explained the more specific mechanics of combustion. So you can check that one out in my list of videos on my channel. Please, thank you. It's a little more chilly than I expected. Hang on a second. All right. What else do we got? Now, you see, the thing is, remember the advice that I had for newbies, which is learn the planets very carefully, right? Then a question like, what if the ascendant lord is combust, isn't really a question that you need to like ask people, because you know the principles. You know what the first house represents. You know what combustion, the sun represents. You know what combustion is. You can figure it out. First lord combust means probably there's too much acids in the body. Hyperactivity in the metabolistic process. Could go the other way around. The metabolism is very, very, the metabolism is very a focal point if the first lord is combust. There can also be a similar effect on the mind, like in the self-identity thing, where it would be like you are kind of, it's like a codependency thing where on a stable person in your life. That's your basic assessment of first lord combust. Of course, this is your basic assessment. You need to mix it with other things to get more details out of it and to figure out what it actually does. Let's see what other questions you got. Let's see. So I just kind of stay away from answering these very specific questions. Therefore, like Moon and Dinishta for Scorpio ascendant with Saturn and Shravana retrograde, because number one, they're so specific, but so they were only relevant to the person asking the question. But the other thing is, just you can figure those things out if you learn about the planets, the houses, and the signs very, very carefully. Or you could have an astrologer, since it's so specific, you should have an astrologer explain it to you when you have one-to-one time with them. India, Blue Ravine Music and BRM asks, is Saturn Mahadasha as horrible as reported? I don't know how horribly is it reported. But obviously the answer has got to be no. A lot of the questions that people ask, I think that you already know the answers. But you just want to hear somebody who has studied it more than you confirm, right? I mean, obviously, Saturn Dasha can't be as bad. It can't be the end of the world because everybody goes through Saturn Dasha. And in fact, if you just do a little case studying, you'll see a lot of people have great experiences in their Saturn Dasha. Learn the basic principles. That's why it's so great to be a newbie. Now you have a chance to learn the basic principles, but you will spoil that chance if you get attracted by the magician type astrology where, hey, here's this technique, and if you know this technique, you'll be able to do everything. It's not like that. Astrology is not technique-y hocus pocus. Astrology is the interpretation of symbols. So learn your symbols. Master your symbols, and then the interpretations become easy. Whatever the interpretations are, this planet and that nakshatra with this thing wrapped around its neck. Who cares? You know your symbols. You can answer it. You can figure it out. So the basic thing about dashas, the first thing that everybody should know about dashas is basically what a dasha is saying is, all right, here's a planet in my birth chart. It represents that I'm gonna get kissed by a beautiful girl. So when am I gonna get kissed by a beautiful girl? When this planet is active. This planet, let's say that Venus in my chart represents some beautiful, lovely girl's gonna come over and give me a kiss on the cheek. So when is that going to happen, right? That's the first thing I'm always thinking about. When is that going to happen? Well, it's going to happen when Venus has a chance to do something because it's Venus who represents that karma, right? So how do you know when Venus is going to have a chance to do something? There's techniques for it. One of the techniques is to look at the dashas. When does Venus have its dasha? You should even also just learn the language as much as you can, or at least the vocabulary. What dasha means. Dasha means a period, an era. So this is when a Saturn Mahadasha is when Saturn has its time, has its period, has its era, has its epoch, has its chance to come forward. So if I have a Venus in my chart that says I'm going to get a kiss from a nice girl, then it's going to happen in a Venus Dasha. That's your basic theory about dashas. If the Venus in my chart says I'm going to get smacked by a beautiful girl, then that's going to happen in the Venus Dasha. Because it's associated with Venus in the chart, it should happen in that Dasha. That's the fundamental symbol. That's the fundamental working theory of how you interpret Dashas. Now don't go. And the worst thing about astrology is that everybody is kind of like a master. Even though they don't really know what the hell they're doing. So, everybody will say, well, I tried that and it didn't work. As if you tried it so clinically and scientifically. You don't really, we don't even really know how to conduct scientific experiments. We're just lay people, but we say no, I tried that and it doesn't work so well. So don't just think, my Venus says that I'll get a kiss from a beautiful girl, but my Venus Dasha passed and no beautiful girls kissed me, so that technique must not work. No, it's it's just a logical, basic technique. It's not that it's wrong. It's always going to be right, but you haven't figured out how to apply it, how to make it work in the real world with other things, other techniques. There's not just one technique in reading a chart. There's many things. That's what makes it difficult, actually. Astrology is really pretty simple, but the complex thing about astrology is that there's so many simple things happening at once. You have to consider so many things at the same time. So if you want to know what your Saturn Dasha is going to be like, the basic thing to do is look at your chart and see how Saturn is in your chart. Saturn, Lord of awful houses, so to speak, or is Saturn in a really bad yoga, or is Saturn in a really difficult house, etc., then you can expect a kind of lousy Saturn Dasha. Is Saturn the Lord of good houses and in good dignity and in a nice house, etc., etc., with good yogas, then you can expect a really good Saturn Dasha. What's going to happen in that Saturn Dasha? Well, interpret that Saturn in your chart. That's your basic thing. Now, don't forget that you have sub-dashas. So then you're going to have to mix the interpretation of the sub-dasha planet with the major dasha planet. And then don't forget that you have other things that are affecting the timing as well, besides dashas. There's progressions, there's returns, and there's transits, which are probably the most important. Right? So it's not a simple thing, but at least get the simple parts right. Like know how to do the dasha, know the fundamental theory of what a dasha interpretation is, know the fundamental theory of how to do a transit interpretation, know the fundamental theories of returns and progressions, and then you have a hope that you could be able to mix them all together into a stew and get a good khichdi out of it. Okay? That was a long answer to a simple question. I'm sorry. Here is it. Here's the thing here. V Bravo asks what my ascendant is. Let's see if anybody can answer for me. I think you guys probably know what it is because I probably tell everybody all the time. Let me see. There was another interesting question here. Purusha says, my mom says hi. Hi, Mom. She wants to know if she can get her and her family compatibility report of her and her family members, or is it just a romantic spouse thing? Yeah, you can do compatibility with like business compatibility, relationship compatibility, any type of relationship. You would just change the factors a bit. Like in a relationship compatibility, the main four factors are the moon, the ascendant, the sun, and Venus. But in a family, like seeing your compatibility report with your daughter, Venus wouldn't be as important. It might have more, you would put a lot more emphasis on moon. You might want to throw in Mercury in there for just a generic relationship and replace Venus with Mercury. Compatibility with teachers, you might want to go with Jupiter instead of Venus. Stuff like that. Compatibility with an older person, you might want to throw in Saturn instead of Venus. So basically, you need to tailor the basic romantic compatibility report. And then the stuff about nakshatras also, you would have to translate it to the different kind of compatibility that you're doing if it's that romantic compatibility. But it can be done, but I couldn't do it for you with just entering your data into my report generator. It would have to be custom. Let's see. Oh yeah, Bonbon already answered. Look at that, she already answered. It's great. That's right, it's Capricorn. So India's got more questions about Saturn, right? She says, but your video on Saturn is dark, right? Because what does Saturn represent? So she asked about the Saturn dashas. She said, is it awful? And I said, well, it depends on what the Saturn is in your chart. And then she says, but you said Saturn is awful. You said Saturn is a really dark planet, right? Yeah, but so what? Saturn represents negativity. Saturn represents nivritti. Jupiter represents pravritti, right? Pravritti means acquisition and gain and growth through that. Nivritti, what Saturn represents non-acquisition, disposition, giving away. And what's the other one? Reduction. Nivritti is reduction. But it's a vritti. It's a progress through reduction. Jupiter is a vritti, or a progress through gain. So it's positivity and negativity. Saturn is a negative planet. It's negative. But why would you think that negativity is bad? See, this is where you just have to realize that you have value judgments that are too biased to your immediate sense of what reality is. Your immediate sense of reality is, for example, if I don't get this cupcake, then life sucks. So any planet that's negative towards cupcakes, or whatever it is that you have your mind and heart set on, that I want to laugh. So Saturn is a miserable planet. So Saturn is awful in my life. So then, yes, you're going to be confronted with miserable things in your life because there's a lot of things that get in the way of laughing. But if you realize that being sober and serious is also really, really useful and important in life, then you're not going to say, well, Saturn is useless. Right? So if you just don't fixate on having things one way, but realize that whatever life throws towards you, you deal with that and work with that, then none of these planets look like they're bad. So Saturn, for example, represents negativity. So it represents reduction, right? It represents limitations. So it represents time and the ability to endure time. So it represents strength. It represents reduction, so it represents cutting things out. So it represents criticalness, being logical and critical and practical. Because Saturn reduces things, it gets rid of fluff. So if you have a very good Saturn in your chart, you'll have something, let's say, for example, you have Saturn and Capricorn in the second house. Well, that looks like it's a very stable, let's say everything else about it is good. You have stable, practical health, long-term endurance, long-enduring health. So probably in your Saturn Dasha, your wealth, for example, is this another second house theme, would be stable. You get a lot of practical wealth. You wouldn't worry a lot about not having money when Saturn is a good Saturn Dasha, because it represents poverty, right? Because Saturn represents poverty, if you put it in a good condition in the chart, it means the poverty is taken care of. It's stabilized. You understand? Saturn represents illness, for example. If you get it in a good mood, then the source of illness is not giving you illness. Instead, it's going to give you longevity. So you have to learn some of the basic principles about how to interpret a planet. Just because a planet is negative in its raw symbolism doesn't mean it always operates in a negative way in the chart. If a planet represents death, for example, and you put it someplace where that should be there, like where it's something that you want to kill, like put the planet of death in the house of enemies, then you got a really good situation. So let's put Saturn in the 6th house in Aquarius, in Scorpio, and not Scorpio, in Aquarius, in Capricorn, in Libra, something that gives it a good dignity. Then you're going to have a fantastic period where your Saturn period is going to be, you're going to be overcoming enemies, overcoming challenges, improving your health, all kinds of stuff. So you see? Okay. Let's see what else we got here. A lot of questions. I guess you guys have been waiting for the last couple of weeks to throw these questions at me, huh? Can I explain? Angel wants to know if I can explain planetary friendships and why certain planets are friends. Yeah. I have a blog post about it where I actually explain it more. So if you go to my blog, which is like these days blogs have been like outdated. Now it's YouTube, right? But a couple of years ago it was like blogs were more read. But if you go to my blog, victorcara.wordpress.com, and find the search thing, the search field, and look for planetary friendships or something, then my blog post should come up. It explains how you figure out the friendships and all that stuff. Basically what you have with planets is there are conservatives and liberals, so to speak. There's like a right and a left wing. So the right wing, that's the conservative wing, right? So the right wing is like, it's headed by the sun. So it's the group of planets that likes hierarchical power. So you're going to have the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter group up over there, with Mars being the enforcer, the police, the soldier, the army. So it likes a king. So it goes along with the Sun. And Jupiter representing law and religion. So law and religion also like government. So they go over there with the king. Then you're going to have on the other side the planets that don't like hierarchical centralized power. The planets that like power to be shared by everybody. Power and entitlement, etc. and decision making to be shared by everybody. So those planets are headed by Saturn. Saturn is a very proletariat type of planet, an every Joe planet, a blue collar planet. So Saturn is the opposite of the kingly planet, the sun. So Saturn likes to share decision making and share power with everybody. So it gets tons of power, but it gets a lot of power in numbers and grassroots type of thing. So it's powerful, but it's a different type of power than the sun. So it's like it's the head of the other group. And who goes with Saturn is Mercury and Venus. Mercury is your intellectual, right? Mercury represents intellect, so he goes with Saturn because intellectuals don't like centralized power. They like free thought. Free thought and ability to exchange ideas and communicate without censorship and so forth is so important to the intellectual process. So Mercury will shy away from the sun's group, even though because Mercury's nature is so friendly, his aversions to the members of the sun group is not that intense, and he can work with it. Then Venus will also, because Venus represents artists, beauty, love. So Venus on two counts is like artists are almost always artists are undermining the government. Artists are letting the people have a voice, right? People have their voice through artists. So Venus goes over to Saturn's side. And also because Venus is love. So she doesn't believe in the need for rules and religions and things like that. She knows that if you love each other, then everything happens right automatically. So that's why you have these two basic camps of planetary friendships. You have Venus, Mercury, and Saturn in one group, and you have the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter in the other group. And by basically speaking, the planets from one group don't like the planets from the other group. That's your basic theory for planetary friendships. There's just some exceptions. There's a few exceptions to the rule, and some of them are quite interesting. Now, where's the moon actually in this picture? So the moon tends to go over to the sun's side because she's queenly and royal. However, because the moon is feminine, but not just feminine. Venus is feminine but decisive, but the moon is like very mild. And also just will accept everything, is interesting and interested to everything. So the moon takes a special attitude towards both the camps, that she's okay with anybody as long as they're okay with her. But the other planets have different opinions about the moon so the moon has a lot of non-reciprocal relationships. But at least now you understand the basic theory about planetary friendship. And let me say that I think the traditional or the popular view about planetary friendships is about these non-reciprocal relationships, like what's the relationship between the moon and Venus, the moon and Mercury. My opinion is opposite of most of the popular, maybe traditional views. For example, I think most people say that the moon doesn't like Mercury, but Mercury likes the moon. Right? But I say that the moon likes Mercury. Mercury is the moon's child, and the emotions like to talk. They like to communicate. But the moon is emotions and Mercury is intelligence and speech. But Mercury doesn't like the moon, because Mercury is the child of the moon. So that's why the moon likes Mercury, but is the illegitimate child of the moon. So there's conflicted feelings towards its parent. And also the more practical reason is Mercury is speech and intellect, and speech and intellect, especially intellect, doesn't really do well when there's a lot of partiality and emotion and passion, which is what the moon carries. So the moon interferes with Mercury, but Mercury doesn't interfere with the moon. However, although I do that backwards than most, I also do the dignity evaluation backwards. Where that is, I don't consider the dispositor's attitude towards the host. I don't consider the host's attitude towards the occupant of the sign. I consider the occupant's attitude towards the host. So since I do both things backwards, my calculation turns out to be the same. My calculation of dignity turns out to be the same as anybody else's. All right, if I lost 1 million people on that, I apologize, but you got to answer some of the questions. Floating Wisdom asks if I use Kala software. Ernst Willem Key Jai. I do use Kala software, but rarely, because I use my own software. But I don't have my software is not portable. It's only on my laptop, and it doesn't have an ephemeris built in. Ephemeridus, or however the heck you say that. And so therefore I need to use some other software to calculate from the ephemeris, or whatever you say. So unfortunately, Kala doesn't have an export feature, and I've been asking them to do it for years. So I actually use Purusha's Light because it has the export feature, but only just to calculate, only just to tell me the zodiac degrees of the planets, and then that gets exported into my software, and then I use my own software. I don't really recommend Purusha's Light, but I just use it because practically I need that export. I recommend Kala because it has the best calculations and it has the widest range of settings. It gives you the most control over controlling what calculations you want to use. So that can also be the most confusing for a new person. But such is life. What's the benefit of worshipping an Ishtadeva? It makes you feel good. And that's the purpose of life. Ishta means you love it. If you're just worshipping something to get some benefit, then that's not an Ishtadeva. Okay? If any Mahapurusha Yoga planet is sitting with Rahu or Ketu, what effect is it going to make it? What do you think? Think about it. You got a Mahapurusha. Sometimes I say don't be afraid to think, and then I say, wait a minute, you guys shouldn't think. Because sometimes you come up with... You need to think. You need to let your imagination run free with legs that actually work. You can't run without legs that work. So that's why, first of all, you need to get a disciplined, clear, logical, structured understanding of the 9 planets, the 12 signs, the 12 houses, the 27 nakshatras. And then you need a disciplined, clear, concrete, logical understanding of maybe half a dozen principles of how to combine symbols. Once you have those as your legs, then you can run. And then your intuition can run. So, if you have a Mahapurusha Yoga and you already understand what a Mahapurusha Yoga is, the Mahapurusha Yoga is the core of how you interpret a chart. Mahapurusha Yoga is a planet should be in a good sign and a good house at the same time. So it should be in a good sign, like its own sign or an exaltation sign, and a prominent house, which is usually defined as the Kendras, 1, 4, 7, and 10. And then you have this thing called Mahapurusha, which means, wow, you're a great person. You're an outstanding person. And then you will interpret the Mahapurusha specific to the planet who's forming it. So the Mars making Mahapurusha Yoga makes you a great adventurer and a bold, strong, courageous person. Saturn's Mahapurusha makes you a very practical, logical person who's able to use few resources to make great results, etc. So now he asks, what if you have that Mahapurusha with Rahu or Ketu? Well, just use your principles, use your theory. Rahu and Ketu expand things, but make them unsettled. Chaos. And also use the principle that you need to know if this Rahu Ketu is in good dignity or not. Let's say that Rahu Ketu are doing pretty good. They're in a house where they are comfortable, right? And it's like, let's say you have Rahu in the 10th house conjoined to Mahapurusha planet, like a Mahapurusha Mars or something. It's going to amplify and exaggerate that Mahapurusha Yoga, giving it a little bit of unsteadiness to it, but really amplifying it and giving it much more and more potential. John V, you asked me to talk about Bhava-Bala, but I'm not fit to talk about that. I haven't studied it. Now this is interesting. Harsh Patel, he wants to know. Oh, great, I'm glad to hear that you learned a lot in the last 15 minutes. That's amazing. Parivartana Yoga between Saturn and Jupiter in the 12th second and 12th houses for Aquarius is saying, oh my God, it's so much information, my brain's going to break. So again, you just have to break it down, but I'll just tell you the basic thing about a 2 and a 12. The thing is, you got to look at every chart as an individual chart, just as you would look at every person as an individual person. And you can't just say, well, that guy has an earring, so he must be like that, because this other guy over here had an earring and he was like this. You can't just do that. But you can say, well, he's probably the same. It's going to be something the same. So similarly, this guy over here has a Parivartan with 2 and 12, and that one over here has a Parivartan with 2 and 12. It's probably going to have something in common, but it's not going to be exactly the same because they're two different individuals with two different charts. But basically, 2 and 12 is actually unexpectedly fortunate for finance. And what this has taught me about financial interpretation of charts, which I've seen to be valid and true on numerous occasions, I would maybe even say 100% of the charts, this principle is valid. With financial things, you want to see a loop form where you're putting some symbol of expense into some place of income, and some income into some type of expense, or one type of profit into another. Like if you're putting the 12th lord in the second house, you're letting money flow. That's what money has to do I wanted to speak in Japanese all of a sudden, to make for money to become bigger, more. You want to let it flow. It has to flow. If it just sits in a bank somewhere, it just doesn't really do much. It has to flow around and circulate. So in the same way, you want to see the financial houses and indicators actually moving around, but not just moving anywhere. Move to another financial place. So like for example, 12 and 2 puts your expenses into your income. So your expenses, you get return on investment, like that. You can even links to 12 and 11 are also like returns on investments. Even though 12 is like, oh no, it's poverty. But if you are moving it around, circulating money around into the wealth and poverty, expense and income, if you're circulating them, it generates, money starts moving, and that gives you the chance to take percentages every time and then grow. So Parivartan 12 and 2 generally is good. Let me see if there's other questions. Wow, this is a far out question. I gotta scroll back up and see what the heck this was about. Something about hypothetically traveling in outer space. My Yeti Yogi, your Yeti Yogi. Look, I have a Yeti microphone. So my Yeti Yogi asks, can you tell me hypothetically how to see if someone will travel in outer space? Not just an astronaut, as a career. Must be Rahu. Must be Rahu. They must have a huge Rahu, probably in Satabishak. Okay. All right, let me look. Eddie, you want to know if planets are retrograde in divisional charts? I should think so. This is interesting. Harsh Patel says, please explain the difference between the 4th, 8th, and 7th aspect of Mars. That's an interesting question. We don't have this principle in Vedic astrology, that the different aspects are different. It's a principle of Western astrology that... did this get cut off? I'm not sure if I'm still streaming or if I got cut off. Let me know if you guys can still hear me. You probably still can't still hear me, or you can still hear me? Let me know Oh yeah, we're okay. All right. Sorry for that little dead time. So what was that last question that we had? Planets retrograde in divisional charts. Difference between 4th, 8th, and 7th aspect of Mars. The different. So that's a Western consideration that the different types of aspects do different things. Like a Western consideration is that a square aspect is rough or malefic, and a trine aspect is benefic or gentle, helpful. And it probably comes from the fact, and you see, like, basically what Vedic astrology is a recording of the older form of astrology than what's currently practiced in the West. So probably where that comes from is the Vedic roots of the idea that Jupiter makes trines to full potency, and Jupiter's a benefic planet, whereas Saturn and Mars make squares to full potency, right? But basically in Vedic astrology, instead of giving a character to the type of aspect, we take the character from the planet. So if Mars is aspecting my moon, my interpretation is the same regardless of whether it's the 4th, 7th, or 8th aspect. Maybe that could be improved, but that's the basic theory. Let's see what else we got here. I don't know why my YouTube is getting this like circle. It looks like I'm having a problem, but apparently you guys said I'm okay and there's no problem. You guys got zillions of questions. I love how Angel always says yo. Yo, I always forget you're in Japan. I so want to get cherry blossom season. Yeah, you got to come here and see the cherry trees. They're amazing. It's right now. It's a little bit past the prime right now. I should probably take some pictures one day or a video and show you. Maybe I'll just throw up a video tomorrow. But it's a little past the prime. But now what we're getting is the showers of flowers from the sky because the wind comes and blows the cherry petals, cherry flower petals all over the place. It's really beautiful. Eddie wants to know if it's called a precession of equinoxes. Why doesn't tropical go backwards instead of forwards? Backwards and forwards is relative. So just switch your point of view. It's the stars that are going backwards to the equinox. Actually, it's the equinox which is the fixed point. There's a quick answer for that. Floating wisdom. Do you pay special attention to house cusps? And are they always 30 degrees apart? Well, that's a very interesting question, which opens up a whole book. Everybody know what a house cusp is? Cusp. Cusp means like a threshold, right? So essentially what a cusp is a defining point of the house. It's the defining point that says that this is where this house starts. Usually it says starts. It's the defining point of the house. So different people have different understandings of what defines the house. Is it the front of the house or is it the middle of the house? Right? It seems like it would be more sensible to say it's the front of the house. So in other words, it would be like if your house cusp, wherever your house cusp is, let's say your third house cusp is right here, then this is where your third house starts. It starts there. On the other side of that cusp, it's not the third house, it's the second house. However, if you look at the ascendant is the basis for all the houses. And again, if you have your basic theory on what houses are, this would be a cakewalk for you. The ascendant is the basis for houses. All the houses are based on based on the ascendant. So the ascendant really is meant to be the midpoint of the first house, not the start point of it. And if you ask me why, I'll tell you because of the natural symbolism. What makes the houses, and it's the lower atmosphere, which is the 12th house, where the sun is at an angle that it gets in your eye. And it's the immediate ground below the horizon, which is the second house, which is the bedrock that's supporting the horizon, that gives the second and the 12th house its character. So you can't put the ascendant, in my opinion, although there are plenty of people who have a different opinion, you can't put the ascendant at the beginning of the first house, because that throws the 12th house up way too high, or the second house down way too low. So the ascendant is meant to be the middle of the first house. And there's this is not, I'm not the only one who says it. There's hundreds of people, thousands of people who take it this way. So then, therefore, what you do is all of the cusps, the defining point of a house, therefore, is the middle of the house. Okay? Now, what's so important about the defining point of the house? Just, it's the same thing as what's so important about the ascendant. The ascendant is the defining point of the first house. If you have Venus in your first house, for example, you're probably pretty good looking. But if you have Venus, and assuming that it's not got an awful conjunction or something, right? Or aspect or bad dignity, then you're probably good looking if you have Venus in your first house. But if you have Venus 20 degrees away from your ascendant, you're probably not as good looking as if you have Venus exalted on your ascendant 0 degrees away from it. Right? So the closer the planet comes to the cusp, the more intensely it affects that house. And also the more intensely it affects the chart overall, because its aspects start to line up with the cusps of other houses. So that's what a cusp is. A cusp is really like, here's the key point, the key degree in this house, which is the most sensitive part of this house. It's the defining degree of the house. Now, another part of the question was, what was the question here? Do you pay special attention to house cusps? That's the first part. So yes, they're super, super important. If you want to know how much a planet is affecting its house, check how close it is to the cusp. Now, the second part of her question, I think his or her question was, are they always 30 degrees apart? Are the house cusps always 30 degrees apart? That answer to that question is it depends. It depends on your house system. So I know people get really aggravated a bit about the tropical and sidereal debate, because it's like, what? It's got to be one or the other. But actually, the whole state of astrology is basically this: you got to pick and choose what symbolic system you're going to use, and then use it. Not just with the tropical or sidereal thing, but you even have to decide what your house system is. So it doesn't get as much press as the tropical versus sidereal debate, but it's equally impactful. So basically, there's two house systems. One is a fixed system, and the other is dynamic. The fixed system is the original system. See, if you just ask yourself, why are there 12 houses? Then you got to think it must have something to do with the 12 signs. And in fact, the actual reason why there's 12 houses is whatever sign is rising over the ascendant, that determines the rest of the houses. So if Libra is rising, then Scorpio is the second house. Libra is the first, Scorpio is the second. Is that right? Yeah, Libra is right. And then Sagittarius would be the third. So that's the basic original house system. It's called the whole sign house system. You just take a whole sign, and that sign defines the house. There are other systems. One is called a fixed sign system, which means whatever degree, it's independent from the signs. You just take 15 degrees on either side of the ascendant, and that's the first house, and then the next 30 degrees below that's the second house, and then the third. So you can have two signs in one house. And then it's the sign which has the cusp in it. Would be the sign that's on the cusp would be the ruler of that sign would be the ruler of the house. Then there's a variation on that theory, which it's not 15 degrees on either side of the ascendant. It's 30 degrees after the ascendant, I believe. And then you calculate your houses accordingly. Those are all fixed systems where the houses stay the same width. So therefore your cusps would be 30 degrees apart all the time. The dynamic system is more modern, which means starts coming into practice around 2,000 years ago. It's the idea that definitely it's already not a whole sign system. It's already extracted the houses from the sign, which I think is not really proper. but then it says they shouldn't always be the same size, because depending on your latitude and the time of the year, the sun, I believe the theory goes like this: the sun moves at a different speed through the different portions of the sky. And so it's actually the speed of the sun which determines which house it's in, so we should expand or contract the houses so that the sun is spending an equal amount of time in each. I believe that's the theory behind a dynamic house system. But the end result is that you get houses of unequal size. And it'll be a ratio between the midheaven and the ascendant, which determines it. So like in the summer, the sun rises a lot further north. Its sun gets up a lot further north than in the winter. So the houses in the winter get accordioned in, and in the summer they get stretched out. In that system, your house cusps would be dynamic. Who knows? You have to calculate how far apart they are. In India, they use this one. Also, they call it Shripati, which I think is the same as Porphyry, which is the oldest version of trying to do that. Since then, they've made better calculations. They have Campanus and other types of systems. But I don't use those systems. I myself just use the whole sign house system. So hopefully that explains all that stuff. I'm not even getting to play my drum today. You guys got zillions of questions. Shivani, how are you? You got a question here, I see. Why do you say that the spiritual path is not determined by the birth chart? It sort of is, but it not fully is. The birth chart tells you about your mind and your body. What can it tell you about your Atma? It can't tell you anything about your Atma, because your Atma is not a product of karma. Your Atma is the origin of the karma. Your Atma is the container, is your will. It's consciousness, and consciousness has will. Consciousness does two things. It perceives. It does one thing. Consciousness perceives, but perception can come in or go out. So when perception goes out, it's called will. And when perception comes in, we call it perception. But all of it is jnana. So you got Gyanendriya and then Karmendriya. So the consciousness develops tools, or indriya, so that it can take in perceptions and that it can exert will. It takes in perceptions through Gyanendriya and it exerts will through Karmendriya. So what does astrology show you? Astrology shows you the shape of the universe, right? And the shape of the universe reveals the time stamp of the universe. What time is it in the universe? The timestamp of the universe is important because it shows you how the causes are fructifying into their effects. Causes fructify into effects over a period of time. And so by studying time carefully, we can understand the progress from a cause to an effect. So astrology tells us about the future, for example, or the past or the present, and more clearly, the link between the future, past, and present is revealed through astrology, because it shows us what time the universe is, what time it is in the universe. And that shows us how the causes are fructifying into effects, but the Atma is not part of the chain of causes and effects. The Atma is the ultimate root of the chain of causes and effects. So therefore, the astrological chart cannot tell you anything about who you actually really are, but it can tell you everything about the mind and body that you have now, and how the Atma is expressing itself through its tools right now. So what impact does it have on your spiritual path? A lot, because you apply yourself to your spiritual path through your mind and body. But it cannot really determine or exhaustively describe your spiritual path, because after all, it's a spiritual path. So if you actually get in contact with your Atma through dhyana or meditation and sadhana or practice, then you'll start to be able to do things and experience things that aren't causes and effects through karma. So if you, in the very, very preliminary stages of spirituality, then the astrology is very useful to show what basic novice inclinations you'll have towards spiritual paths. What kind of relationships do you have? What kind of relationship do you have with philosophy in general? How is your intellect suited to grasping spiritual concepts? How are you with discipline, self-discipline, because that's going to be involved? How are you with stuff like that? Love. because there's different types of paths with different types of minds. But it's really the more that you advance in the spiritual path, the less relevant it is what your mind and body is all about. So astrology really can't limit your spiritual path. All right, we're gonna only have to be able to take one more question. What's this? I got some strange message. This is $2.99. Can you mantra? What's this? I've never seen this before. I'm sorry if I'm saying something I'm not supposed to say. Can I do mantras for the days of the week? I don't know what that would be. Please don't pay me money if I don't know what I can do. Send me an email to explain what you want me to do. I'm impressed that you just sent me the $3. So sent me that's very nice of you. But I don't really know what to do back in return. I mean, I guess you would want to know mantras for each planet that rules each day of the week. But days of the week was not really included in the Panchanga. Days of the week is a Greek concept. I mean, okay, it is included in the Panchanga, but in the Vedanga Jyotish, they don't talk about days of the week. They have titis, which are phases of the moon, phase days. So how Vedic it is. But anyway, it's good to chant mantras. So I guess you could just take a mantra for the planet that's associated with that day of the week and do that mantra. All right, so Rebecca, let me know. Send me an email and let me know more what you're thinking about. Let's discuss this more and let's see what we can do about this. You have my email address, Rebecca? And let me know. And then the last question that I'll do today. Yeah, as I said, Anton, I gotta skip questions. It's just the way it goes. I'm not like a question machine. So I'm just gonna jump to the one that attracts my attention. Okay, the last question I'll take is, why do astrologers on YouTube say that planets in the Navamsha Lagna are really important? Because they're in the Lagna. Doesn't that make sense? Anything that's in a Lagna, close to the ascendant, is very important. So if a planet is in a Navamsha Lagna, then it means that it's either literally very close to the ascendant in the real sky, undivided sky, or it's at some sort of a 45-degree angle, I believe, or a 60-degree angle. It's at some sort of a very important angle to the ascendant. Otherwise, it wouldn't wind up in the Navamsha Lagna. So this planet is configured in a certain key way with the Lagna. So this planet is more important. Right? Just makes sense. Okay, my fellow friends, let's end it here. Yeah, I was going to play you one more beat. I mean, actually, I wasn't going to start with that beat that I started with. I was going to start with, I was going to show you what, I think this is, I forget what this is called. This is a long teen tal. It's a 16-beat teen tal. Teen tal is the most popular bhajan beat, So this is a real long beat that's good for when they're slow. It's kine da gi da gi da de ta urke ta urte te ta ki kine da wait ki kine da di da. Actually, I haven't played it ta urte te ta ki kine da di da. Then you have to do that's ki kine da di. Something like that. It's very good for when the kirtan is slow, because it's a very long beat. So I thought I was going to be doing beats every once in a while in this one, but I guess I didn't get a chance. Maybe next time. All right, my friends, thank you for joining me. And I'll see you again next week. Let me see I'm not sure yet what my subject will be for next week. I'll post it soon and let you know. Thanks, everyone. Me and Purusha might be doing something interesting on our other day of the week. we might be doing something where more about reading charts. We'll see if that works out. And I'm not sure if I'm going to go to Sedona or not. I'm thinking about it. Thank you. With my best wishes and love for all of you. I'll see you soon. Bye. You know what? I'm back because I just remembered when I just remembered how I actually like to play that 16 beat. It's more. Wait, it's not kikineda. That's the other one. That's the first one I learned. The one I like to play is. But and also I didn't play. It's. That's it. Something like that. Here's a simple te hai. That's a simple te hai. I'll do that te hai again. And I'll do another one. Here's a different te hai. I like that one a lot. This is really nice for when it's slow, quiet. And then you can switch up to the halftime of the time. Okay, now I'm done. Bye-bye.